is Behind the Games from newoverlords.com, where we seek creators of all kinds to find out what's behind our favorite games. With your hosts, Jeff and Seema.
This is New Overlords Behind the Games podcast. And from our Midwest studio, I'm Jeff Illemek.
And from our Northeast studio, I'm Seema.
Today, we're joined by Joanna Keler, who's a marketing and project lead in the games industry in Poland. Joanna, welcome.
Hello, everyone. Really happy to be here.
I'm really glad to catch up with you again. So we met at PAX, which was really fun and really opened my eyes when I met you and got to that that Poland indie industry booth with like a dozen developers, which we'll talk about. But it opened my eyes to how much game development is actually going on in Krakow. And then I dug into it a little bit, and I'm really glad to have you on to talk more about it, about why that's happening and what's coming out of there. And people can probably guess there's like Projekt Red as a big anchor, and that's part of it. But
yep.
I'm really interested in that. We'll talk a little bit about the game that you just wrapped up some work on, that you were working on out there as well, which is kind of a little fun thing. And a lot more about the games industry in general and the transition you had from traditional business industries to the games industry and how that works in Europe. So I'm really excited.
Yeah, I was really happy to meet you. And PAX West was actually my second trade show during the year, or rather, actually third. It was my second in the US. I did PAX East first and foremost in Boston, and then did Gamescom in Cologne. And I've been in games for less than 2 years, so it's been all really fun and joyful ride for me. So really looking forward to the conversation.
Excellent. That sounds good. So you've got, I mean, you've still been a couple years in it, so you've got a good view across a few different kinds of aspects of it, but still a little bit fresh too. So you can come at it with that perspective, and that's what I think is going to be fun. The compare and contrast, because a lot of people, if they get out of university and they start a game studio on their own, they've never seen anything different, and they don't really understand what some of the differences are between a traditional business. But why don't we start where you and I met, which was the game that you were working on with the studio. So just describe the studio, describe the game a little bit. I've got the art book that you gave me when we were out there, which is really cool. But yeah, start there, and then we'll talk about the other stuff.
Yeah, so the game we were showcasing at the PAX West in Seattle was Moonshine Inc. It's a game by our own studio. So the studio I've worked in for the last 10 months and whose contract I finished recently is Klabata. So it's a publishing and porting and a developer all at the same time. So Moonshine Inc. was an original project they've been doing, and it's one of the biggest for the studio, where you basically impersonate a moonshiner. You do all the crafting, all the recipes, strategize your prices and when and wherever you go about. And as you can see, Jeff has the moonshine example that we do have in the game as well when you just start your operation. And it was super fun to showcase in the US, get the feedback in Boston and Seattle. And the premiere for the game is scheduled for 1st of December, actually, this year for all platforms. I think first on Steam, obviously, because that's the easiest always to go on PCs, get the feedback, and then on to the consoles.
It did catch my eye. I thought it was a pretty interesting spin, and Klabata has done a couple of them, which is sort of like based on some U.S. culture kind of things.
Yeah.
And this one, when I grew up, I wasn't like a moonshine runner myself or anything, but it used to come in mason jars like this when people would either get their hands on some or make it. So that I thought that was interesting.
I mean, we're old, but we're not that old.
Yeah. And now anyone out there, no one will know what's actually in this jar.
Exactly.
That's gonna make for a good. It's 11 o'clock in the morning here when we're recording.
Yeah.
So you can guess this is probably not. But yeah, it's kind of cool that it's simulation plus like it's both crafting simulation and market simulation.
Yeah, a
So I think that
tycoon.
was
Yeah,
fun.
yeah. So there's economics to the game. You can experiment with different brews you do. So you can start obviously very basic, like moonshine, but then go on to whiskeys and more complex alcohols. But there's a lot of
Mm.
replayability to it. But you can learn a thing or two as well. You can actually learn about, the temperature, the kind of alcohol percentage you can do, what people expect from pricing as well. So it's quite complex. Like, I personally really like Tropico. I did accounting and finance as my degree, and for me, the compliment that I did understand my studies was making sure I can win in Tropico. And it's a
Yeah.
similar case here, that you can actually be able to learn economics as well, not just chemistry, and have fun along the way.
That's interesting. That idea of economics as a gameplay element, that's been around for a while. It's been in a
Yeah.
lot of games. A lot of MMOs have that as a component, whether they meant to or not. And I
Yeah, along the
remember,
way as well. Yeah.
yeah, I remember back when like World of Warcraft just got started and the started to get really, really big. And once you had a massive number of people and the idea of the auction house, and even
Yeah.
multiple auction houses back in the day, there was even like market arbitrage, moving things around, and then people controlling the market. There was a couple, there's this like student research papers, but there was a couple university research papers on the economics of MMOs and the
Yeah,
economics of
it's
World of Warcraft.
fascinating. And I think, sometimes people discount games that it's obviously simulated or it's by AI, but I think sometimes games are your best playground instead of,
Yes.
Yeah.
investing your own money and not playing on the stock exchange yourself if you're too timid. So I think auctions are the best, way to see the market working and play the economic game and see how people try to, make their fortune either, the right way or at the expense of somebody else. So I think
Right.
World of Warcraft is a great example. Obviously I kind of missed out on it because I had the very high ping when it was really in, and I think I was actually too young to get into the first revolution that World of Warcraft was for a lot of my colleagues in games.
Right.
I was focused more on single player games and RPGs. But it had such a profound effect on everything, on monetization of games, on the rise of mobile games as well, and the business that people have with skins and like additional packs to games that are in AAAs and other titles. So yeah, World of Warcraft is one of the best games I think to start off with.
It is fascinating, and as you said, the actual real life economics around monetization models are getting very, very complex and
Yeah.
very interesting from a research perspective of what.
And it reaches people that would never read an economics book.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. And I think sometimes, people get really into the economics because they want to try for themselves, and then they get a bit of financial education as well. Like, for me, it's a bit different, obviously, because I did accounting and finance. So for me, finance isn't
Yeah.
everything. But for people who are really scared of the numbers, games like World of Warcraft are a great intro into that, and kind of maybe financial planning in their own, life. That, okay, I get this item for this much. Can I get a discount? Can I get an income out of it or not for my character? So I think even single player games, like I played a lot of Mass Effect and a lot of RPGs and other style like Dragon Age. You learn a lot, and especially if you're young and keen to do it, you learn a lot through games.
And I think
Yeah.
also that one of the most important lessons you learn doing that, and we're kind of digressing now, but is that it takes effort. Like
Yes.
it's not
Yes.
just buying one good item that you turn around. It's like thousands of incremental things. And you
Right.
spend a lot of time each day doing
Yeah.
it if you want to be that, millionaire in the game.
Yeah, a merchant route is not easy. It's not.
No. And if you want to get your master's degree, if you want to get your MBA,
Yes.
then you go play Eve
Oh,
Online.
yes.
Oh, I
So
heard about it. Yes. Yes.
The economics in there, everything, there's manufacturing and logistics as well, transport across the galaxy, and each of the markets are separate, so the market arbitrage between them is very diverse. But you can contract with other people to do the logistics part, and then you need to figure that into your economic model. So you could contract with a manufacturer to manufacture the good. You could
Yeah.
contract with a with a shipper to ship it, and you're going to learn both macro and microeconomics across that, and all of the people in there are such experts that the margins are like down to like 1% or a 0.5% if you got to like do it perfectly. So
I remember, when Eve was launching and people were, trying to figure it out, but that's such a great example. And I think I have to get back to my business school colleagues to remind them of that, because that game could be a great simulation of, when people think about getting into investment banking or really, really financial roles, that you can actually simulate it and like see, you're not going to make money because you think everybody else doesn't see the deal. You're going to make the money because you see that one deal nobody else sees. And I think Eve, Eve is a great example.
Oh, well, okay. Well, as Seema said, we're a little bit off topic, but yeah, that's fun. And those kinds of games I think are really fun. And what Moonshine does is fun. There's also the crafting part of it. And maybe we'll come back to that a little bit. Mm-hmm. I just love those kinds of games, and maybe we'll talk about the kinds of games we like. Yeah. But before we do that, I wanted to get into your backstory, your origin story. So where you started, and then like a few years back, how you decided to go into games and how that all worked.
So I've been a gamer all my life, to be honest. I've started playing when I was 6 or 5 years old with my elder brother. And one of the first games I played was Duck Hunt. And then, getting into school was Quake 3, Arena, all the things that I always thought would be just a side hobby. I never thought that games could be a career for me, to be honest, because it was just not something that was showcased in Poland, I believe. Everybody wanted, kind of doing the usual business route or a profession that, parents would be proud of. And so I went for mathematics and geography in high school. And then it was an easy choice to go for economics degree. And I did it actually in the UK, but I chose a more, vocational route. So for accounting and finance. And I started out as an auditor, which is a good, I think, party story nowadays, because nobody would assume I was an auditor. It was very long, 4 months I was with a company in Warsaw. And, I just started out in corporate. I thought doing business school in the UK, that was the only option for me. I thought that was the respectable route. I still diverged from it because I did marketing, which I had as a subject at uni. And I thought amazing because you could spin tales, tell stories about the product, get people excited about it. And I always wrote things, so stories, short stories. I wrote fan fiction since I was a teen, actually, for Mass Effect, for Alexander the Great, like all over the spectrum. And I never thought that could be a viable career choice. So my story in games started 2 years ago in April, when there was a community management and social media position at 11-bit, whose fan I was for nearly 8 years by then, because they released a game called This War of Mine. It's a fun story on its own because they admitted it to set reading list in Poland. So actually, game as an interactive fiction nowadays can be set reading in high school. Optional.
Really? Oh, interesting.
Yes. And when I started out, they were still in the process, but now that I'm out of the company, they had it, I think, confirmed 2 or 3 months ago. And it was a huge deal, I think, worldwide altogether. And I was a super big fan of that game. I had 100 hours in. I was recommended it to everyone. When I was at university, I had a radio show about music and video games, and I wrote reviews. And one of the first reviews for a student paper I did was This War of Mine. So I tried out for the role. I didn't expect anything because I tried to get into games a few times before, but I either was not, accepted. My CV was too weak. I didn't have experience in games, and game developers usually require you to have some game development experience or have some time already in the business. And I was an outsider. I was a gamer, but I didn't know anybody on the inside. I also, I think, found the role via LinkedIn because I think they were quite desperate to find someone. So they branched out, and I learned about the role outside of gaming spaces at all. And it was funny because it was one of the best conversations I had in my life for the interview. I remember it was, really different from corporate. They were very laid back. about it. They asked me questions. I laughed at my own jokes because it was very confusing to me at times, when they asked me, well, what creative stuff do I like? What are my hobbies? Whether, in corporate, all the conversations were very skill based. So they would, for example,
Right.
ask how proficient you are at Excel, how good you are with people, what would you do in this sort of situation, what's your weakest spot, what's your best spot. And you're very kind of answering the same questions to different companies all the time. Whereas with them, it was, how would you promote a game here? How would you answer a fan if they're really, nagging you online? And I was just like, okay, I've got to answer this and this and this and this. And it was a really nice conversation. It was a different conversation. And, I was very burnt out after corporate, to be honest. I wanted to try something different. So the social media was a link with my hobby because, as I said, I wrote
Sure.
fiction, I did other things, but I ran also fan accounts for TV series in Poland, like a Facebook group and Instagram page with memes for it. So I had community management expertise in my spare time that I didn't know could be a career. And yeah, that's the start. I've been with them for 10 months. Then I moved on to another road. And that's when we met, actually.
Yeah. So how much would you say that you talk about these sort of like two aspects of
Yeah.
your experience and your skill set, which one is very very structured, very
Yeah.
analytical and structured and I mean, which are amazing skills for a lot of things. And another side is really communicative and creative. How much do you think, and I would expect potentially quite a bit, how much do you think the structured side, even though you're not doing economics and accounting
Mhm.
in the game roles, how much do you think that structure
Yeah, how do
and
you
those skills have applied?
yeah.
It helped me tremendously because game dev is, known as soon as you get into it, it's known to be very chaotic. So it's done
Yeah.
by people who are always in the same role, in the sense that they started being in game dev because they really wanted to be in there and they didn't venture outside of it. So I think my cultural shock coming into from corporate into games was kind of buffered because of me being organized and liking analytical things and being able to organize myself. Because otherwise, if I came, I believe at least, if I came from a very creative role outside of games, I would struggle really much doing the community management and social media that I've done so far.
It would
Because
be easy to be overwhelmed, especially with community management.
yes, because
Right.
you have to, think of answers on the spot. It's not as in corporate that you have, for example, PR pieces planned out a year in advance, or kind of having the levels of approval you need. You have to be in games. You have to be reliable on your own and kind of be your own boss in the sense that obviously there are team leads, there are departments, there are department heads, but you're expected to own things, and like ownership is a really big part of every job in game dev. And actually, for me, it was a very tough lesson because in corporate, on the other hand, I kept getting knocked down for initiative, for taking ownership. I was supposed to just do what my manager said. And it was always a source of conflict in my previous roles. Whereas in game dev, they told me, you're the expert, you're here for a reason, do it. Which was,
Yeah.
very very different set of gears and skills. I think, in social media, being analytical helps a lot because you're able to see trends easier, to see what's working, what is not working. Because sometimes people believe it's all about writing copy and being super creative, doing dances on TikTok and being, open and like going on meetings and having cool lunches and all that stuff. But then management will ask you, for example, what is performing the best, and you have to plan, especially if you have direct reports like I had. You have to schedule things or schedule a plan or a strategy so that the people who are not you are able to follow up on what you
Mhm,
have as a
Right.
goal.
mhm.
So the skills really came in handy. And overall, my corporate experience came into networking because I think networking is sometimes really tough for game dev people because they are either quite introverted or they don't like people, which I think is very,
Right.
very very funny at the end of the day because they do create things for people, and games are very much about people and communities. But
Right.
some of the, brightest people I know, they struggle a lot, to be out there, to talk about themselves, talk about their skills, to talk about what they're doing. And I think it's a shame. So what I do, for example, with Women in Games and other organizations is trying to get people to talk and
Yeah.
really kind of get them out there, because it's normal to me after business school and corporate that you talk about yourself and about your accomplishments, because nobody else will remember do it.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
I want to focus in on the communication and the
Mhm.
creative part as well, but just back on the analytics part for a second. I think you're absolutely right. I think that bringing those kinds of skills, those organizational skills, those analytical skills, especially to marketing in any industry, the
Yeah.
more analytics that you can bring to it, the more analysis and planning and understanding and evaluation of the outcomes,
Yeah.
the better the marketing program. And a lot of marketing does struggle. In fact, the best marketers and the best advertising firms in the world will tell you, only 50% of my advertising dollars are effective. And I just don't know which 50% it is.
Yes.
I messed up that quote a little bit, but that's a famous evaluation of how marketing works. So the more you can evaluate, both for the outcomes you're trying to drive for the organization, the better for them.
Yes.
And the better for you, in, as you say, in owning it. And this is in business as well. If you're sort of a marketing director, you need to make a case for the marketing dollars that you're going to spend.
Yes.
And you need to say, okay, for X amount of marketing dollars, we give me $5,000, and this is the way it'll be spent, and this is what we expect the outcomes to be. Because if there's not a return on investment in spending those dollars, you shouldn't be doing it. And just doing it just because other people do it, or it's a thing that happens. Oh, people put ads on TikTok. Let's put some ads on TikTok.
Yes.
That's a bad idea.
Yes, and I think, a lot of times as well, like games are getting professionalized only now, like game development and video games. So the dollars are getting into the industry now. Like it's not the same as I was, used to as FMCG. Like I worked in Mattel, Philips, and other corporations, and then you do have, the history of the companies being on the market for 50 years, 60 years, 80 years. And you see how the advertising has been done, what you're able to do as a new person or a new department. But in video games, everything is new. Like in Europe especially, I think it's different in the US, obviously, with Activision Blizzard being on the market so long, like Atari being the frontier, Microsoft even, or Sony. But in Europe, a lot of companies are only 20 years old. Even CD Projekt had their anniversary recently. People Can Fly as well. Techland has been hitting their 30 years old of age. And the business got professionalized now. Now they are the advertising. Now the dollars are coming in. And one move that's very fascinating to me is that a lot of corporate people come into games nowadays. Like there's a lot of people who never worked in games professionally, or even are not that into games themselves as gamers, but they get into the roles because the business needs it to run the ads, to make it return the investment, to make it make business cases, because they're on the stock exchange, there are investors. And on the other hand, you have a lot of people who got into the industry because they've been, fans of games for so long that they wanted to make something for themselves, which makes the industry very much like film industry, which is one comparison which I think really rings true. They've got a lot of money, you've got a lot of passion, but at the same time, you've got business goals or creative goals, and sometimes these clash and they are not compatible. But at the same time, I think for me, it helped a lot to have business school experience and being in corporate, because a lot of the behaviors that are happening are, mended by people or created by people who never worked in corporate, and they are named as corporate. And I'm like that, no, it's not corporate. I'm sorry. It's like, it's the 6th or 7th role I have. This is not corporate. I've been in corporations. No, this is, weird management or management style you're trying to push. It's not, it should not be labeled corporate for people who never were in corporate, because it sets different expectations as well.
Interesting. I think another aspect of this, which I would be interested to see as you continue in your career, one of the things, especially in indie, is people tend to get into these roles and they wear a lot of hats, right? So they have to do a lot of jobs, right?
Yes.
If I had a 5-person studio and you came in to do the marketing job, customer communication, I would have a hard time not like on the
putting
side
you.
going,
I would give you some more hats.
Yeah. Hey, can you also be the CFO?
Right.
You know, I would do that immediately. I mean, do you foresee needing to do that kind of thing, or?
Yes, I think people were asking me after I quit corporate why I didn't go, for example, for like the triple A's and other things. And I think for me, having indie experience is amazing because you do have to have ownership over everything. So when I was in Klabata, in my recent role, I did, biz development. I talked to the devs. I had game developers pitch games to me. I had to take care of the booth, be at the booth, be with the media, be with the influencers, do trailers. For example, I wrote scripts for trailers and made them with freelancers. I made my own posts for social media and posts for the community manager because he didn't want to, do the style I wanted to strategically. Or for example, he was not keen to pick up the skills, so I was to pick the slack. And it was amazing. Like I learned so much more than I was able to do in my corporate roles. And, after being 10 months into the role, now I understood why people were apprehensive about me in corporate, because when I was getting into game dev, people asked me, what actually can I do? And I thought in corporate, I knew how to do a lot of things. And nowadays I see, actually, it wasn't true because I was used to getting guidelines from, the global team or the regional team and doing by the book or like doing things only in a small aspect of it. So, for example, writing copy for instructions or a manual to something like in Philips, it was, for example, translating things for a hairdryer. But that was it. I was just doing the translation. I didn't have overview where the manual would be, what languages it would be printed in, where it would ship to. Whereas in games, you kind of, you do the ad for Facebook, so you write copy, you do the budget, you do the group, the targeting, you think of the whole strategy. How does it go for the whole budget of the campaign you have?
Right. You're writing the guidelines.
Yes. Which I think
you're the whole department. It was. So that is a great difference. And I've worked in small businesses and large businesses. The idea of in a very large business, there's power in being able to specialize, and you can take somebody and get them very specialized in their particular role. But then, taking that when I need someone and to be able to be the department, because I don't know, because there's only 5 of us and we started this game studio and we're creatives and devs. To need those kinds of skills, it's very difficult. It's also though a difficult situation, and I think game studio founders need to be careful because you can go out and find those people, but you need to then realize if you find that person that is super, super valuable. You call those people unicorns.
It's very rare. Yeah, it's very rare.
To bring all those kinds of skills together.
Yes, and I think it's very important to remember not to burn out the people that you bring in who have all the different skills, because at the end of the day, I think big companies can get people specialized and kind of get them into the roles and boxes they want to, whereas a whole department in one person is really tricky when just one thing doesn't work out, or like one cog in the whole scenario you have for the person doesn't work out, because everything collapses and the person can just quit. So you're left with no one to fill the void because they've been doing so many things. I had it in one more role. So one role that I quit in the end, actually, they hired, I think, 5 or 6 people to do the things that I did in like different levels, obviously, but like different levels of being intermediate into it or not, where I got feedback that people assumed it was an agency running the communication. And I said, no, it was one person. I just kept doing everything. And I said, why would you expect it was an agency? Because the quality was so good and it was so consistent. And I was left that, maybe I should have realized it sooner. Maybe I should have asked for more support or other things.
Yes.
But at the same time, that role taught me so much. It was one of the, it was kind of like awakening for me after corporate as well. And it made me realize that maybe I'm not actually a business person. I'm more a creative / business person. And I never found a role before game dev who could enable me to have the very analytical skill set and creative skill set all in one. Because the guys I had at 11-bit, they were super supportive. Like I had a marketing lead who would look at my creatives and he told me, "You're the expert. I believe you can do it. And whenever you need me, I'm there," without, worrying about the hierarchy. And when I came into my first role in game dev, I was super about the hierarchy because that was the way in corporate. And I kept getting, maybe reprimanded, I think would be the correct word, about not seeing the hierarchy as as clearly as I should have probably. And in game dev, it was immediately going together with execs to coffee, grabbing lunch together, getting into brainstorming sessions with them, and I was just like, what is happening?
Right,
I'm not this level, but I'm not okay. You invite me, I'll go with you. Okay. And it's been amazing. And I think people who are scared about getting into game dev, I think should realize that the industry is very different now in 2022 and 2023 nearly than it was 10 years ago or 15 years ago. So many people are needed. So many skills are needed. I did my own hiring for my own role at Klabata. I had 2 reports that reported directly to me. And it was such a struggle, because people have so many skills, but they are not able to talk about them, or they don't see how transferable they are. But yeah, with my example, I never would have thought, like, if you told me 5 years ago I would be in video games, I would say probably as a tester, right? I would test games for a living, right?
Right,
And
because we all know how to play games.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
we think that's what we could do.
Yes,
But
and one time I actually tried to get into QA as a tester between my, I think, study breaks at university, and I didn't get the role because they didn't have any projects. And I thought that, okay, they don't want me, I'm never gonna try again. And I didn't try for some time, but the roles are so diverse, and it's a business at the end of the day. You need the people who can sell stuff, can advertise stuff, can talk at conventions, and at the same time, take ownership of the things they have. Like in game industry so far, that the people I found are so knowledgeable. Like in corporate, I think there were some people, who could be considered mentors or, the kind of front runners of the industry, but it was a handful of them when it came to marketing or sales. Whereas in games, like 70% of people I met could be mentors, but they don't consider themselves mentors, or they don't want to go into that route because they do have imposter syndrome, and I never would have expected it in video games.
That's interesting. We did back in episode 8 of this series, we interviewed Hector Padilla of IO Interactive. And that interview, speaking to what you're speaking about right now, really opened our eyes to how much that's needed in the games industry, because he was a people manager. So his job was just career management, people management, making sure that people are even like taking their vacations so they're not getting burnt out, making sure that they have growth opportunities and training. And if you want, this is for the people that are like thinking about bigger and bigger studios. If you want to grow your studio, you're going to need to be thinking about those kinds of things. You're going to need to think about HR and, and hiring and career management. You're going to need to think about people management and team management and making sure that things operate well. You're going to need to think about economics and finance and marketing and so expanding the view of that, I think, is really important. And being careful not to burn people out.
So I think games are a creative industry at the end of the day. So a lot of people come into with a lot of passion. For me, it's a bit different because, as I said, I'm from business school. So for me, work is work. And only after getting into game dev, I kind of found passion for the role that I have and, the drive. Whereas a lot of people that worked with me, and I worked with them so far in game dev, they came into the job first and foremost because of the passion. So
Yeah.
whenever something bad is happening, they find fault in themselves instead of, for example, of a system or that they don't have
That's
enough
interesting.
support, which I find really, really, sad at the end of the day. Because in corporate, people talk about it quite openly, that some roles are to get ahead, some roles are for getting the better paycheck, some roles are for you to grow and learn what you want to do. Whereas in games, I've met so many people who are burnt and out already, or they are, they were the worst case of burnout. Whereas I had managers in corporate who were burned out, and I thought that was bad. Whereas in games, they didn't even think that the fault was not with themselves, which I found so
Yeah.
bad. And I spent so
That
much
makes
time
a lot of sense.
actually. Yeah, I had such deep conversations with people in game dev I never thought I would have with like work colleagues. I also learned not to separate career from relationships, which I did because that's what you learn at corporate and business school. That your colleagues, sometimes you can find friends, sometimes it's really tough and you can't do anything about it. But in games, yeah, the best friends I have so far are my work colleagues, or they're from events. Even PAX West or PAX East, some of the best people I met
Yeah.
through the events. And only because I kind of accepted that I cannot split it anymore. Like it doesn't make sense. Was I able to help some people as well? I think kind of realize as well that you got to take your holidays. The company is your life, but it's going to function with or without you, which is really sad, to many people in creative industries.
Well,
Yeah.
I mean, preventing burnout is really a partnership between the employee and the company. The company provides a certain culture, but you as a person, you have to learn to set your boundaries. Otherwise, nothing the company does is going to prevent burnout. And when you're passionate about something, that's when you're the most vulnerable, but it's also where it's the most important that you learn to do that.
Yes, because my experience being in community management, you're kind of expected as well to answer as soon as possible, be always snappy, witty. And for me, it was a great break from corporate, where I was supposed to be, fade into the background, not disturb anyone, say good morning instead of hi to my managers. So I thrived on that role. Yeah, I was once told off because I kept saying hi to a CEO, and I didn't realize it was bad. And one of my managers said it to me.
Wow.
Yes. Whereas
it's
I stopped.
not though. I mean,
that might be cultural.
It was.
There are
but
better corporate
the funny
environments where you can do that.
But the funny thing was that the CEO noticed I didn't say hi to him, and he said hi to me. And he's like, what's going on? And I'm like, okay, hi. Now I'm supposed to say hi. I don't know what I'm supposed to do anymore. In games, nothing like that happened. And I've been the happiest ever since changing the structures. Obviously, the industry is different than normal businesses because you do have projects. It's not, a project that you put out every year or every month. Like, for example, some corporations do. Like with, I always like the example of laundry detergent or sweets. They're always on the market because you need them, and the people will always have roles. Whereas in creative industries, you have projects which take 6 years, 7 years. The games I've worked in, Klabata, for example, they were announced last year. So 2019, no, 20, but they were in the works for some time. And I was the second marketing manager on the publisher side to take it over. So the roles are sparse, and it's sometimes hard to get into the industry, but it's super rewarding. And obviously, I'm on the road now between contracts, so it's just getting into the foot into the door as well.
I think there's a couple key lessons that you've sort of described there that people really need to think about, which is if you're in it because you're passionate about it, you need to be careful, because if you want it to be a long-term career, and if you want it to be a career, it's also a little bit of a business, and you need to keep that passion. No, we never would want people to lose that passion, but you need to sort of separate success or failure of the business parts of it from your passion and your personal work.
Yes, exactly.
So there's no reason that you should internalize changes in the market, or there's other great games that come out at the same time as your great game, and you need to either change direction, or you get some rabid fan that has some negative feedback. That's not on you. Yeah. And don't take it that way, for one. And then the other thing which you really described, which is across all of this, is it's still you're creating a job for yourself, and you need to you need to treat it as a job in such that you need a personal life still as well. And you need to be able to shut off once in a while, because that's good. That will, and we've had multiple of the creators talk to us about this. That will put creativity back into the role too. So don't kill yourself with that passion. Make sure that if you want this to be a sustainable career kind of thing, that you add a little bit of the structure and you add a little bit of that separation. Don't go as far as these crazy corporate environments. And just so you know, not every corporate environment. In fact, a lot of really good corporate environments are not that way. I worked for Accenture, I worked for Microsoft, and you could walk down the hall and say hi to Bill Gates. And that was perfectly, no one would ever tell you not how to talk to Bill. You talk to him however you want. So there's,
yes, I know, but thank you. Like, I appreciate it so much, because I think, American corporate culture is different to European corporate culture. And I like to say Polish corporate culture is a beast of its own. And I was in regional teams as well. Whereas, you have the local teams, then you've got the regional teams. And we are always a bit of an outsider to the local teams, which was a struggle on its own. And I think a lot of times people assume corporation is just like one big blob of like all the behaviors, all the things, all the structures, where it's very, very singular. But I appreciate it, because so many people I share, the stories I've had in corporate, immediately deny or immediately say that, it never happened or something like this. I appreciate it.
Oh, no, I mean, it certainly could. Well, yeah. I mean, there are, but on both sides, there's really good ones, but there's also even worse than what you experienced. So
And I'm aware of that. I think I'm still I think my time at corporate was super fruitful, and I'm super glad for it, because I took the leap, I tried it, and I'll never have sort of in the back of my mind, I'll never have the kind of wavering. Should I have stayed longer? Should I have tried it? Yeah, I tried it, and then I burnt out. So I know for sure.
And now you can also bring what you learned there to some of these other games organizations, with it. I think is going to be really powerful. The cultural differences. This leads into something I was really interested in as well. The difference between business, in Europe and in Poland versus other places. I know the games industry is very different. So we're finding these pockets of game development that are springing up in different areas. There's a big game development group sprouting up in Boston. And there's a lot of stuff in the Northeast and a lot of stuff on the West Coast, and
the Midwest.
And barely in the Midwest, but some in the Midwest too.
Starting.
So I think we need to get more going in the Midwest. That's what I think. But let's talk a little bit about Poland and how that sort of developed over the last 20 years, and because it's not that big an industry, but it is bigger than we think, and it's growing, right?
Yes. I think it's very dynamic. I've heard a figure being quoted, I think last year during conferences in Poland, that there are around 12,000 people in total in all roles. So from QA to marketing to producers and other, programmers as well. So it's a very small industry. I was super surprised because in marketing and corporate.
Yeah, that's like a tiny department inside of Accenture. I mean, Accenture is 450,000 people.
Yeah, exactly.
In one company.
And I think even in Warsaw, you could have marketers from mid to big corporations above 12,000. I think there would be even just in one city, whereas that's supposed to be the whole business. And I think it's fascinating to me. As I said, I've been a gamer all my life, and I've worked now with people whose games I would play, or who were responsible for getting the games from the West into Poland. For example, CD Projekt is a really nice example, because they changed so much throughout the years. They started out as a dev studio, then they had the business of getting the games in series on physical discs. And I had these discs, I played them, and my boss actually in Klabata was responsible for some of the business. And it was fascinating to me that I worked with a person who introduced me to games, not directly, but still in a sense. They also, have obviously GOG, which is good old games, the shop with old retro games. Yeah. And I worked with them when I was working at 11-bit doing community competitions for Frostbank. Which, a lot of things that I was able to do as a teen or a child, I've been able to do now professionally because the business is not that big.
What I've seen, and it sounds like what you're describing, is when there's a big anchor studio, you got like a CD Projekt Red, that's a big studio, that oftentimes what you can get is then smaller indie studios or more of an industry sort of growing up around it, because people come in and out of those big studios and like maybe go off and do a fun project of their own. So you said some of the people you worked with had worked either with CD Projekt Red or some of these other organizations.
It's a one anecdote that's like a really fun anecdote in the industry, that there's a game from the creators of Witcher 1 or 2 or 3, and it's everybody in the industry.
It's everybody in the industry.
Yes, or like nearly everybody, especially for programmers. There were such big teams there working for CD Projekt, and I think it's a testament to the industry. I think that people bounce in and bounce back. So a lot of people go out for a few years, they come back, then they switch, or for example, do mobile games, and then come back into developing for consoles again or PC. I haven't, so far I haven't seen anyone quit the industry altogether. It's more that people know somebody from that company going there. So for example, it's CD Projekt, Techland, 11-bit studios, Huge Games, for example, 10 Square Games, Rage Quit Games, Bluebird Team. It's a lot of smaller and bigger studios. So you've got the indies, you've got the double A's, you've got triple A studios who started out from the teams that were first in CD Projekt or 11-bit studios or Techland, and nowadays they do their own thing, have their own spin on things. Or there are people like who always stayed in the indie scene and they've just bounced back and forth between indie projects, or they work as freelancers. I think that's quite usual for Poland as well, that a lot of programmers work in a lot of studios at the same time. And because obviously there's NDAs and competition clauses, but they figure out a way to be able to do their own thing, do a triple A project, and still have independence, which I think is awesome. I never heard about it in corporate before. So video games really enable you, and game development, I think, to be able to pave your own path, and what you said as well, make your own job and figure out what is the best thing for you to do. Because community management, for example, is a contract work usually. Me being full-time community was an exception, as I learned only after finishing the role. Marketing people go as consultants as well, so it's very different. It's, for me, it's a new ocean of opportunities nowadays, trying to figure out what I want to do, whether stay in one place, do a thing here, do a thing that, or do a new thing altogether. But 11-bit studios actually was settled after some of the team went into there are lots of like founding stories, obviously, as I said, that some of the studios you can clearly link them to the bigger ones, or they just thought about independence altogether. Or like, for example, Klabata was set up by the people from CD Projekt Red as well, like from a different part of the business that I think changed their direction, and they wanted to do games. So I worked for people from CD Projekt Red, not being in CD Projekt myself, for example.
That's interesting. So it sounds like, the way you're describing it, that there's a pretty good feeling, and especially with people coming out and going back in, a good feeling about CD Projekt Red in particular. Because I know there was, there's challenges around the, Cyberpunk 2077, and a lot of people working a lot of hours, and there was criticism from the outside. It's difficult to see if people have a good feeling and like the company and like working there and go out and come back in. That's more of a testament to what's actually going on than an article that might get written on a one-off.
I think like obviously CD Projekt is alongside Techland as well, I'd say, is the success story of Polish game dev. Like the game got introduced, obviously, I think Obama got the copy of Witcher 3, if I remember correctly. And it was a really big deal in Poland that, oh my God, the president of the States has a copy of the game, and it's a game from Poland by Polish people. Wow. And, it's the sort of thing that makes the headlines, obviously, and it's a badge of honor for so many people. That's why the anecdote rings true, I think. The game from the creators of The Witcher. And they set up the tone, and I think kind of showed what the business could be like, because Cyberpunk obviously was a phenomena. I wasn't not in video games when it launched. I was actually finishing my contract in Berlin for Amazon, because I did a contract with Amazon as well, and I left Poland, and I saw it everywhere when I came to Warsaw. It was on billboards. It was I think they had a merch line with like clothes in one of the very popular shops. They had drinks. They had a phone starter, in the sense, you could buy a branded phone contract in one of the key,
Interesting.
Yeah, it was all over the place. And I was like, I working in corporate. I was like, oh my God, finally someone in gaming is doing corporate level advertising, because it was everywhere. It was on bus stops, billboards, and it got, the word out as well abroad. And, obviously then came the situation with the state of the game and other things. But I think they're still, sort of the ambition of many studios that they made it work. They made it work and had the, Polish game dev advertised everywhere. So you've got a lot of international people working in studios nowadays. I think that was a big boost to recognizability of the studios abroad. When I was at 11-bit, I had some international colleagues as well, which I was surprised coming from corporate, because in corporate it was, normal, but I didn't assume that a creative industry, when so many people speak everyday Polish, they'd be international people, comfortable moving to the country, comfortable starting their life anew. But they got so much support, I think, video game dev industry altogether, that there are international people starting their lives because of the studios, that they moved because of the job. Yes, and I think, Techland, obviously, with Dying Light and the big, they're on par with CD Projekt, and I think it's just different genres. I think People Can Fly as well with Outriders. I think that was a huge deal for the industry, that they got a deal with Square Enix as a publisher. I remember that being the topic of conversation, that, wow, Square Enix is a publisher for Polish game? Well, and I think like if you ask people 10 years ago if that would be possible, it'd be super hard to imagine.
That's really cool. I like the idea, and this is maybe another point for anyone thinking about the games industry in general right now, which is here's some opportunities to go outside of your market, to explore, especially if you're just sort of just getting into it and you're just out of school, traveling, going to Krakow, which is an amazing place, and CD Projekt Red. What about that? Or what about, any of these other studios that are around there now?
And
there's opportunities there that would be really amazing, and back and forth.
Yeah. Right. And with those bigger companies, whatever your profession, if you have one already is, if it's IT or if it's reception or if it's HR or if it's finance, they need those in gaming.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, and I think, some studios actually have offices abroad as well. I think CD Projekt and People Can Fly do have studios abroad as well. I'm not sure. Yeah, I think that's a thing that you definitely want to research if you're thinking about being international, because some of the companies have been able to branch out, and that was a big success stories as well. That I don't know, like 15 years ago, if somebody could imagine a studio branching out and actually having the talent directly from the US or Silicon Valley or UK or Germany, and it's possible nowadays. Like, so many people work remotely as well, and I think the pandemic and COVID definitely made it easy on management to decide to hire people who work only remotely. And whenever I'm looking for roles nowadays, the remote option is there. Like, it was not there 2 or 3 years ago, which really limited where you could move. Obviously in Europe, like, there's the idea of Brexit as well, and the repercussions of studios being in the UK. A lot of very good publishers and studios there, and the conversation getting a lot of a lot more complicated because of Brexit. Because when Schengen and the EU was together, it was easier, but it is still doable. I think I would definitely urge people to, if you like a studio, if you like their game, it's always good to just even, reach out to recruiters and stay in touch, because life can take you on different routes. I would never imagine I would work in games like 5 years ago. I would laugh.
Right. I've just started to research a couple studios and try to talk to a couple that are new studios that are completely remote and they have no office. So there's definitely opportunity in that area. One thing I definitely wanted to get to before we wrap up today is some of the other work you've done in women in games. And so sort of tried to diversify the roles, not just geographically, but trying to incent women developers. And so why don't you talk about that for a couple minutes? Because I think this is super important.
Yes, I've been super proud because I was approached to get into women in games, actually. I'm an ambassador with the organization. So the organization is based out of the UK, and we work really hard to get women and minorities out there in terms of, talking about the situation of female developers and LGBTQA as well, in terms of opportunities, in terms of being in the spotlight. I was able to do a few panels on what the situation is in Poland, what the situation is in other countries. And I actually had 3 panels in GITS and PGA, so that's Poznań Game Arena and Game Industry Conference, which was one of the biggest in Poland. And our goal is basically to get women talking and doing mentorship and just, I think it's very hard to imagine yourself doing a role if you don't see it being performed by someone. It was the case for me. Like I never saw community managers. I didn't know what a community manager was, or a marketing manager in games, what they did, what they wanted to do, because there are not that many people, or especially women, speaking out about their achievements. And in video games, as I said at the beginning, people are super humble. I was not used to it. In corporate, we were taught that you gotta promote yourself, you gotta talk about your accomplishments, you gotta get your face out there to management and other people, because you're your number one fan. And if you're not your number one fan, something's wrong. Because you gotta promote yourself. And I've been super happy with women in games because it let me network with so many women. I'm also working actively on making networking opportunities available in Warsaw, which I'm based out of, actually. And some of the studios I worked with are in Warsaw. At the end of the day, it's about visibility, because that's super important, because so many women are afraid of the, I think, stigma sometimes still about video games, that's a boys' sport, that it's only for men. The men obviously are very visible in terms of being game directors, being heads of studios. But there are so many women and so many roles, and the voices are very important. I was actually one of the 2 women in a marketing team. So it was, I was super surprised. I learned about it on the day of on the first day of my job, that we were the 2 women only in the whole team, which never happened to me in corporate. The corporate had a lot more gender, split. It was much more even.
Yeah.
Whereas in games, I talked about it actually at Poznań Game Arena, that a lot of times during trade shows, I was the only woman going to after hours, or the only woman at the booth, for example. And people would assume I was I was a fan of the game. I was not working at the booth, or that I was part of the trade show. I don't know, like how to say it, promoter, but not for the game itself, not from the studio, that I'm not a dev. And it happened a few times. And, to me, it's funny because after corporate, everything, like, it's funny to me. I don't mind. But so many women, I think, find it, not welcoming. Yes, and not accommodating. And I also had struggled a lot with getting women onto the panels to talk about the experience, because they think they're not knowledgeable enough. They've been 10 years in the industry. They don't know anything. They're like, and I'm like, what? I've been 2 years into it. Like, you know so much more than me. And, at the same time, the best mentors I've had were men, actually. Like at 11-bit, I had the marketing lead who was awesome help. Like, he was so patient with me. And without his support, I probably would have burnt out. It was really tough sometimes, but he was, like, really solid. Like, that mentorship made me realize I can mentor as well. And one of the things I can share actually today, because I got confirmation about, is that I'm a mentor for Women in Games International. So another organization which is more US based. Women in Games are international. So I'm super happy about it. And over 3 weeks, I'm going to share my, skill set and how it's been for me to transfer from corporate into games. And I never would have thought it possible last year when I was just starting out, that the feedback would be useful, that my perspective would be useful. I kind of would have assumed, yeah, everybody's doing something. I don't know. I don't know. But it's super, like, I think, yeah, if you cannot imagine it, you cannot picture yourself doing it, it's super hard to get the drive to get into it. A lot of women don't apply to jobs if they think they don't have the 100% credentials match. And it was the case for me as well. After just talking to, HR and other people, a lot of times the job advertising is not done with the hiring manager, hands-on. It's like a list by HR, which is like the ideal candidate. And sometimes, the ideal candidate would have like 5 years experience in a social media platform that launched 4 years ago, which doesn't make sense.
Right, exactly.
And it's very arbitrary.
And in all industries, yeah.
Yes, and with the women in games, I'm now very passionately going forward with it, because the panels made me realize as well that people have questions how to make the ads for women to apply more, how to approach women to be on the panels, how to be out there. Because, I mean, for women in games, I'm very different, I'd say, in the sense that I'm very extroverted, and games enabled me to do that. I was pushed into being more introverted at corporate, and it's been a struggle for the 2 years to kind of get back into the real personality I've had all my life, which got kind of squashed out of me in corporate, but regaining it nowadays. And it enables me to be the voice for women who are more shy, but I'd still love to have more of them sharing their insights, and men as well. Men are so super humble in games, and the ones that talk a lot, sometimes I think the same in corporate. I mean, the people who talk the loudest usually don't have the most important things to say, but at the same time, overall the industry is super humble, and I think that'd be good to change, to share the feedback, share the
talent
setback
and the expertise.
Yes.
I think one of your key points there that is really important is think about what you can bring to the organization.
Yes.
Not what the organization is necessarily only asking for. Especially as we've been describing through this whole last hour, is in the indie studios where they don't even necessarily know what they need. So we need a social media person to do posts on social media. Okay, I get that you think you need that, and you do. We'll do a little bit of that, but here's what else you need. You need project management, and you need marketing expertise, and you need planning for a campaign. Do you understand what a campaign is with inputs and outcomes? And so think about what you can bring, and especially for diverse candidates, 50% of the gamers are women.
Yes.
And everyone in the world plays games, and we need everyone in the world to then also be making games.
Yeah.
So that we can address those markets and bring that and make things better. And gaming studios, the best of the best, are definitely recognizing this. How can we get that talent in to help us make a better game? That all of that, and then you being a mentor, and the people that do have these expertise, mentoring other men, women, whoever in the industry, of how to bring their skills to market to make these better games, is just going to make everybody. It's going to rising tides.
Yes, and I also want to say, indies recognize as well that it's not only the big players making the change. Like so many indies I know, they are at the forefront of being for diverse candidates, because at the end of the day, games tell stories. And the more diverse people making the games, the more diverse the stories can get. And without it, we're always going to be, playing the same game. And it doesn't, it's not good for anyone. It's not good for the creators, because they want to tell the stories. It's not good for the players, because they will get bored. And you cannot keep doing a clone of the same game mechanic. And, with the medium growing so strongly, BAFTA introduced new awards. The Golden Joystick Awards as well introduced, I think, trailer awards nowadays, which, sees the medium maturing and getting better at it, and people being, so much more open to it. Like my parents thought I would be in corporate, and nowadays, like, we keep joking that they should have let me play Sims and Total War even longer into the night at high school, because I actually doing it for the job. And it's so much different than it was 20 years ago. And for some people, it's hard to accept it, that it's becoming open and diverse and so much different than what they remember founding, for example. But I think it's a growing problem. The money gets in, the more people are interested, more stories get told, and you just gotta adapt to it. Like there's no way of escaping it, I think. And so many, to me, the panels were a test whether anybody actually wanted to make a change. And so many people actually came up to me after the panel with questions. How do we make this? How do we make that? And I'm in touch with some of the organizations after the Poznań Game Arena. Yes, and I'm super excited to do something. And in Poland, I think it's a bit different as well because so many things, get to us quite late, in the sense of, obviously after the fall of communism, it's a different stage of various things in terms of diversity, CSR, what corporations are doing, what private business is doing. And for me, for example, I thought some things were already in place, but I'm at the forefront and I'm founding them, which would have been super scary a few years back. But nowadays, with the confidence from video games, I'm up for the task, so to say. And if it's not me, nobody else will pick it up because they've not picked it up for 20 years. Right, so now it's the time to start doing something else and something different.
I think those are all the best perspective to have out there. And to sort of bring it all back around as we wrap up here, when I went to PAX West and saw you at the booth, the first thing I thought was, great, here's a woman running a studio that I want to go and talk to. So it was not, this is a contractor or a fan or someone helping out. I think as the industry matures, as we get more women running studios, and we've talked to women running studios and founding new studios, that hopefully that will become more of the norm, and it certainly should. So thank you very much for the introduction to Moonshine and the games there at PAX. And this conversation, I think, has both been really enlightening in understanding what's going on in both the transition from corporate to indie games, what's going on in Poland, a little bit of the feel of the differences.
Yeah.
And then your work specifically, which I think
you have a really unique position in all the different varied positions you have, and also you have like a view into lots of different layers of gaming. So it's been very elucidating. Thank you for coming.
Yes, thank you for having me. And it was such an honor as well to be invited. I was really looking forward to the conversation. And I really enjoyed meeting you at PAX. I'm super happy that, meeting somebody, in my second tour to the US, where 5 years ago, I never would have thought I would be in the US before 30. I'm super happy that, the connections we were able to make at the event, they go forward into different things. So thank you for having me. It was a pleasure.
Excellent. Well, thanks. We'll stay in touch, and hopefully we'll hear about your next project real soon as well.
Yeah, definitely. I think, it's game dev really made me realize how far people can go and how different and how diverse it can get and how many things can be done. So I'm really excited for the future as well.
Excellent. All right. Well, we'll talk to you soon. Cheers.
Later.
Cheers.
This has been a New Overlords production. For more, please visit newoverlords.com for video, subscribe and feed links, and other ways to help the show.